Hello, this is Tasha Bergson-Michelson from Google. I'm a Search Education Curriculum Fellow here, and this is Writing Successful Queries 2, using Predictive Search to teach advanced operators. So I'm going to start out but with a couple of quick notes about the webinar today, and then we'll go into the content. First things first, I'm projecting on your screen a copy of what you're probably seeing during the playback. And you'll see in my picture that there's an arrow pointing to a couple of buttons right down here. This button is the play pause button, which you might want to use several times during the course of the webinar. This button is the stop button. If you push it, I believe it'll stop playing and take you back to the beginning. As long as you push this one, it should hold your place in the webinar. So your first potential use of the pause button, on your screen you should see a URL that is bit.ly/predictive2. If you would be so kind, if you have the time, to pause this recording and take a moment to try out our survey. This is going to help us get a better idea about what people are coming into our webinar understanding, tells us more about the folks who are joining us today. There'll be another survey at the end as well in case you want to see where you progressed. So we don't want you to use Google and search for things to try to get the answers. Just look at the page and give us your best answers from reading the information we provide there. So if you want to pause for a second and do that, I'd be grateful. Thank you. All right, so second thing is that if you want to follow what other people have said while they're watching this presentation, or add any comments of your own, share your favorite uses of different operators or ideas you get for how to use them, you can go to our Twitter hashtag at Predictive Search. So you can go to the Twitter hashtag and see what you find there. And if you want to search for it on Google, you can do a search for hashtag Predictive Search. Come over to this left-hand panel and click on the More button to open it up. Go to Real Time, and you can see the other comments that other folks have made while watching. Okay. So the last thing is we're going to talk about the most useful operators in Google today. There are a lot more, but even the ones we're talking about may be a lot to take in one sitting. So if you're feeling frustrated, by all means, if you feel there's a lot to take in, by all means, record your time, hit the pause button, record your time to know where you are, come back and watch more another time. You'll also find posted on our website a link to a timeline that will help you figure out where you can pull the slider to that you see across the bottom of the screen in order to rejoin at the appropriate point. You don't need to watch from the beginning. And we'll pose challenges throughout this. Go ahead, use your pause button and give things a try yourself. All right, predictive searching. So what is predictive searching? Well, last time we talked about how it's pretty much stop and think. I can't tell you how many times I have been giving a talk and afterwards someone comes up to me and says, you know, it seems perfectly clear, but it never occurred to me to think before I typed something into Google before. So believe it or not, that is the first rule of predictive searching. Think about what you want. And as we talked about in the last webinar, Writing Successful Queries 1, which you can find a recording of on our website, it's really important to search not for the question that you have in mind, but actually for the answer you expect to find. And so, of course, if you want to know what is that answer going to look like, you need to take a moment and predict, what do I think the page will look like? What do I think will be on the page? And that is the basics of predictive searching. And of course, predictive searching is the flip side of the AASL and ACRL standards for information literacy. We talk about a student's need to be able to choose a communication medium and a format that best supports the purposes of the product and the performance that be able to choose a communication medium and a format that best supports the purposes of the product or performance and the intended audience. That's a quote from the ACRL standards specifically. So what that means is we want students to be able to say, I have this information, what format can I put it into so that it will be the easiest for other people to consume it and understand what I have to say. Think about flipping that the other way. Think, okay, this is the information I need. How would someone have communicated that to me, have chosen to communicate that to me in its most appropriate form, and then you use that to inform the queries you write. A good example is last time I told a story about a middle school math teacher I know who wanted to use world population growth data for a real-life data set, and he had the class search for it, and it took them 45 minutes to figure out that it was going to be in Excel format. This was back in 2007. It wasn't yet available on Wikipedia, and they wasted the entire class period trying to find the data and learn none of the math that went with it. Had he stopped and thought about it, I strongly suspect he would have figured out it was a table and probably would have come up with some way to find the answer. And today we'll talk about what some of those are. So I find that students, there are many students today, the internet is, I feel, training students to be more and more visual. And so they actually, I find, even young, like elementary school students, often have a lot of detail in their head about what different kinds of web pages look like, but no one's ever sat them down and talked to them about the different types of sources that would be online, what they would encounter and what kinds of information each would contain, and when one kind of source would be more useful than another. And all of this is part of predictive search. We're going to be talking about the operator portion of it today. So when you stop and think, these are the questions you want to ask about. You want to ask, who cares about what I care about? Who do I trust to give me the information I need? What words would I use to describe it? And what words would my trusted source use? Which words would be the most common, or which words would be most common in the type of source that I need to turn out good academic work? Where would my trusted source publish this information? Why would someone use one format or another to communicate this information? And how will I know what information, when I found the information I want? So let's look at a quick example of this. We have a business student who's emulating an African tour company owner and wants to check which national parks in Kenya get the most traffic over time. Wants to know how many people visit which parks. And tried the search Visitor Parks Kenya. Let's take a look. If you try Visitor Parks Kenya and use your left-hand panel to go back to General Web Search called Everything, here we have a bunch of results. And there's like TripAdvisor stuff. There are people talking about their experiences searching, but they aren't actually giving statistics. And if they are, they're awfully difficult to find, and I'm going to have to pick through a bunch of stuff. So what do I do? Well, first, what do you do? I'm going to put the question back up on the screen. I want you to pause and try it out. Okay, so let's run through the questions that we talked about, how you ask yourself, who would be likely to have this information? Well, if I think about it, Kenya probably has a Ministry of Tourism, and that Ministry of Tourism probably has the motive to create this information and access to the best quality of information. What kind of search terms do I want to use? Well, if I'm lucky enough to really know about this field of tourism, then arrivals is a strong search term. It's a term of art within the tourism industry to talk about who comes to something. I may know some park names that I can use in my search, or maybe that I understand that the statistics I want are for a range of years, so probably different years will appear on the page. Where am I going to look? Well, in this case, if I think it's the Ministry of Tourism, I'll probably Google and figure out what their website is, and I want to search within their website. Why would something be in one format or another? Well, this is another example where I expect to see something in a table or a spreadsheet, because what I really want is two axes, right? I want the years and probably like park names. And so we have park names going one direction, maybe down the side, years across the top, and each cell is going to tell me how many visitors came to one park in one given year. And I can easily look and compare. If it was in text, that would be horrible. It would be unpleasant for the person to communicate it, boring to write, boring to read, and not easily accessible. So I really think that a table or a spreadsheet is my best option. And I know that spreadsheets are often made in Excel. And then how will I know when I have found what I need? Well, when I have the number of visitors in each year to each of the nationals in Kenya, and I can compare them easily, I'll be pretty happy. So here's what I try. I take my search Visitor Parks Kenya, and I add site tourism.government.kenya, and then I'm going to also add file type XLS because I think it's probably going to be in a spreadsheet. And look at that. There's one link, which is an unusual result. But the amazing thing is, when I click through, it's actually exactly what I want right down here. And I hear from so many of you, especially who teach in K-12, that your students get so frustrated and overwhelmed by millions and millions of results. I often find that if I hit on the right combination of operators as part of predicting what my search is going to look like, that I can get 1 or 5 or 10 answers only, and they're all good. It's a really amazing kind of experience. So let's look at the search I wrote and talk about the pieces of it. So one, I used site colon. This is an operator. You'll notice that right after it, I put a web, sorry about that. I put a web address, and there's no space between the colon and the web address. This is saying, hey, Google, don't look at all the web that you know about. Don't go through your whole index. Only look at the pages that you know of that are on this particular website. Secondly is this file type operator. These are two of my favorite operators, site and file type. File type operator is followed by a 3 to 4 character extension, file extension. So we're mostly familiar with many from Office, like XLS for DOC. We're familiar with HTML as well, although that would be not such a good file type to search in unless you, for some reason, absolutely remembered some page you were looking for that you knew was in HTML, because there are so many options available now. But basically, you can go to this advanced search link right here that's right under the search button, and you can see that here's my search, Visitor Parks Kenya. And you can see here it says search within site or domain, and here is the site I want to check. And right here is the file type. Now, the advanced search page, which I strongly recommend exploring, it's another way into a lot of these operators and has a number of other interesting features, so it makes sense to take some time looking at it. But here we can see there are several file types offered, but is this all you can do? Actually, no. It turns out that pretty much you can search for any file type that you can dream of. So for example, I can search for Morse code, I love you. In a file type, I know that Wikimedia has this special sound file type called OGG. And now you'll notice I can have all these different file types, files where I can listen to I love you in Morse code. And if I look at in the search results, they are all OGG across the board. Along the same lines, if I wanted to find Captain Cook, I wanted to follow his route and kind of live it myself, more than just looking even at a map, I can do file type KMZ to look for Google Earth files. And in point of fact, if I know there are 2 types of Google Earth files. There's also file type KML. The problem is, as you may remember, when I'm searching in Google, each of these words I put in, Google is going to look for all of them together. There's a little invisible and in between each of these, requiring them all to appear on the page that gets returned. So instead, what I do is between these, I put an or. You'll notice I put it all in capital letters. And what it does is it says I want either this or I want this. You don't need to find both because it would be impossible to have, of course, two file types in one file. So now I look at my results, and they mostly seem to be KML, but here I found a whole bunch of Google Earth files on the journey of Captain Cook and other things related that have the word Captain Cook in them. So we'll look more at OR as we go through this, but going back to file type, there's another really interesting use of file type. So I have a coworker who told me that she looked for chore charts for her family, and she found that most of them were not printable. So she searched for chore charts in PDF format. She also searched for chore charts in XLS. You could use file type PDF or file type XLS. It would work perfectly well. But what's amazing about that is then she was able to find something printable, and when I went and experimented with it and looked for different kinds of charts, I found that charts seem to be, for popular subjects like chore charts and dumbbell workouts and stuff, seem to be something that a lot of more malicious folk out there know that people will look for, and I found a lot of cloaked websites. That is, I found when I just did a regular search without file type, I found that it was not uncommon to click on a link and get Google's interstitial page that pops up and says, we think that there might be malicious content on this website and you probably don't want to visit it. And in fact, when I do it search with file type, like here, the websites that you find may in fact have malicious content on them somewhere, but because I've searched for a particular file type, Google will go in and will check and make sure. It kind of pings the site and says, is this actually a PDF? Is this actually a PDF? And find out if it is. So you're a lot less likely to run into malicious code. One of our attendees' original broadcast of this webinar pointed out that for teachers, that's often a problem with worksheets. When you're looking for worksheets, it's common to get onto malicious websites that download bad viruses and malware on your computer, and pointed out that this file type might be a great way to go. Going back to the Kenya example, we can actually go to study, let's see, study Kenya parks visitors. And again, this is a predictive thing. I look and I see, oh, wow, there are actually a couple of PDF files here, and I realize, wait a second. Now, a lot of times when I've seen studies and reports, especially from emerging developing countries, they often are in PDF form, even a lot of reports from our government. So what happens if I try searching for PDF because I want to know what kinds of studies have been done on visitors to parks? And now I see I get the study of visitors to Hell's Gate National Park, and I get, well, that one's about Tanzania, but I get park pricing in Kenya and the impact of tourism on biodiversity, all kinds of good stuff. So let's move on and look at another operator besides file type. Let's say that you're researching Henry May's role in the free speech movement, and you found the free speech movement database in the Internet Public Library. Now, I want to search within all the documents on the free speech movement database to find out which ones refer to Henry May. So what can I do? And I guess here I'm saying go check out the Internet Public Library as well if you want, or just Google Free Speech Movement Database Berkeley to get the URL. So go ahead and pause and try it out. Okay, so here's what I would do. I would take this particular search. It turns out that the Google site search can do more than just looking within a website. It can also look at a directory. So it's pretty common for me when I hit on a source that looks like it's got a lot of really amazing stuff in it, I'll actually just come down here and I'll actually highlight, I'll actually copy a piece of the URL. I'll just pull it up here, stick it in a site search, and look for my search term. So here, what I have now is I have the 5 pages within the free speech movement database, and you can see it comes from different parts. And if I visit the database itself, it doesn't have a site search. So I can do that here using cite. So even though there's a slash and then something in a slash, I can actually search within these longer form URLs for a term that I want. So here's another challenge using cite. So there's a student who needs statistics on women in the workforce. And he wants the statistics and doesn't want to have to gather them from a bunch of different sources and be bothered with citing all these different kinds of sources, you know, not just gathering here and there, because she knows there must be some kind of payload of statistics out there. And she's also been told, or he's also been told, that he's supposed to pay attention to the authority of his sources and figures that government must be a pretty authoritative source. And there might be a bunch of government statistics in one place, but he also remembers that in the past, he's had a really difficult time with the kind of funky language that government sometimes uses to describe what seem like pretty common ideas. So the question is, how can he go about and finding the proper terminology to write his good queries? What search would you do? Pause and try it out. Okay, so here's what I'd do. I would say, okay, the first thing I know is I want a glossary, because that is a collection of vocabulary words on a specific subject. And my subject in this case is labor. Now, I can run that and I'll get stuff from all over the place, but what I really want is government sources. So I can do a cite.gov. GOV is what we call a top-level domain. You see them all the time, .gov, .com, .mil, .org, also countries like .us or .uk or .ca for Canada, and I think .bb for Barbados. Anyway, you can use any of those here to just search within that kind of site. So if you look at my URLs here, everything is from a .gov, but not one site. I'm looking at the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Department of Labor. I see that I'm pulling back, I think, some state government sites as well. All kinds of interesting stuff, but all from the government. Now, here's the next question. The student said, okay, great, now I've found these wonderful sources, but are there any more that I'm missing? Like, I know that glossary is the right word, but I can imagine when I think about the page that sometimes when I see lists of terms online, well, they're called that. They're called list of terms, or they're called vocabulary, or sometimes they're called dictionaries, even though this is technically a glossary. So do I have to like do ors on all those? Do I have to do glossary or dictionary or terms or vocabulary or is there something else I can do? Pause and try it out. So the way I would deal with this problem is I would actually use a tilde. A tilde, which is that key, it's usually just to the left of the 1. I press Shift to get it. And this tilde, when it is actually touching the word in front of it, triggers an automatically generated thesaurus that looks for related terms. In Google, it's not so much synonyms that you're getting as terms that we find that people use in the same context as the term that you're using. So it's not necessarily a precise match, but it is often a very good conceptual match. Now in this case, I'll run this search, and you'll see the results are pretty much the same. And I'm not surprised by that, because in the case of government sites, that it's true there really is this controlled vocabulary, and so I expect they'll see pretty much the same, that they'll all use glossary instead of use other words. However, say I do poetry. Here I'm going to get really different results. First, without the tilde, what I get is I get glossary of poetry terms, but poetry glossary, glossary, glossary. I keep seeing the same words again and again. Now if I put in the tilde, I have glossary of poetry terms, I have poetry terminology, I have poetry vocabulary, I have a definition of poetry, which might not be quite what I'm looking for, but you see that it's brought back all these different terms and put them in my search results for me. Often, I'm sure you've noticed that Google synonymizes automatically. There are words you can type in, like one I was experimenting with recently was thumb drive. And when you type in thumb drive, actually it brings back, it understands flash drive sometimes, so it's not here. So there are words that we understand mean the same thing. Oh, I was searching for something in my last webinar where we're looking at when did the American Revolution begin, and it also brought back start for begin. So there are times we know that words are pretty much synonymous, and we'll return them both. And if we don't, you can stimulate it with a tilde like this. So this tilde helps expand your range of terms. Oh, and one more thing, because it's automatically generated, I really do like to pay attention to what results it's giving me. I don't just use the tilde and then not observe. And I tend to use it, I use it a lot with glossary because there is the very messy terminology around it. People express the idea in many different ways, and the tilde does a good job at capturing those ways. But I mostly use the tilde with certain terms that I've grown to expect particular results of over time. So when you use it, do pay attention to what it's doing. However, so glossary helps, tilde helps expand. What about when I want to contract my ideas? For example, an elementary school student I know who was doing a report on coyotes. So let's take a look at what that search result looks like. When I search for coyotes, the results I get, there's something down here about coyotes. And let's see, as I go down the page, there are things about the animal. There are also a lot of things about the sports. So even for a young child, even if there's a lot on the page that's about what I want, having stuff that's about something clearly different, especially the same thing over and over again, can be extremely frustrating. So in this situation, what do you do? Pause and give it a try. Okay, so here's my solution. I use a minus sign. A minus sign is an operator. It works as a not. It means take out this word. Don't just take it out. Don't give me any pages with this as a result. And as you'll see, my results here are now entirely about the animal. Sometimes you'll get news results that will be based on coyotes and phoenix without the minus sign, like it'll assume you want both even though you put the minus sign from news. It's just a little, you should be aware of it so you can explain to your students what's going on. But generally speaking, I thought about coyotes, and here I used predictive search again, and I thought, okay, there are all kinds of different terms that could appear on the page with the coyotes. It could be NHL, it could be hockey, but I'm going to try, I think that usually when people talk about the hockey team, they're going to most commonly say where they're from. So I chose that for my minus sign, and it seems to have worked pretty well for my results. Sometimes, though, when you need to get rid of an idea, you'll need a different approach. For example, I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. So I had this student, a 5th grader, who loved mythology and wanted to read about giants. So he did his search, and here's what he found. As you can see, he was pretty annoyed right at the beginning. And so he started saying minus baseball. And he saw, wait, there's also football. So I'm going to do minus football. And when he ran it, he also actually got soccer at the time. So he ended up with all these, with a soccer team, so he ended up with all these minus signs. And that can happen in lots of different things. The band, Jethro Tull, when you want a historic idea and you're just minus music, minus band, minus, and you keep minus song, and you keep minus, 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 negative narrowing. Sometimes you just need to positively narrow. Say to yourself, okay, what's the word that's going to identify what I want? It is mythology. And this will give me good information about giants and mythology. It will help me then build more complex searches, perhaps, on top of that to get to more in-depth information. So sometimes I need the minus sign for negative narrowing, and sometimes I need it for positive. And for the record, we do giants minus baseball, and the baseball ones go away, except in the news, as we talked about. But if I put a space between giants and baseball, then the minus sign is not viewed by Google. The minus sign is viewed as some extraneous character that gets dropped. And now all my results are for giants and baseball. So always, always, always make sure your minus sign is touching your term. Make sure your tilde is touching your term. Make sure your cite colon or file type colon operators are touching your term. And all will be well and happy. Now, this is all well and good for if you have one word, because here we have giants minus baseball. What if I put giants minus baseball team? Team just comes up in every search because the minus sign doesn't apply to the word team. You need to put quotation marks around it, and then any sites with baseball team will come out. But interestingly, the San Francisco Giants shows up because maybe the phrase baseball team isn't actually on the page. Another example of this is if I do a search for Hunger Games or Harry Potter. We discussed briefly before that the OR operator says I want one thing or another. Well, let's look at what happens. Here we have the results for Hunger Games or Harry Potter. And I'm seeing weird results because Harry is not bolded in my results. So apparently it wasn't thinking that Harry was a search term, but it did think that Potter and Hunger Games were a search term. And I'll see that again and again if I look through my results. And I'm not really sure why that's happening. Well, right now, what Google's thinking is that I'm looking for the word hunger, and I'm looking for the word Potter, and I'm looking for the word games or the word Harry. So after it found hunger and games, it ignored Harry and then just skipped and showed me that it found Potter. So the way I deal with that, because there are times when it's a much more critical information finding failure than this, where I just want everything to appear on the page, now we look at the results and we see that I have results for Harry Potter here, and they're bolded. And if we went further through, we would find results for Hunger Games. And apparently we have to go further down, but here's one from Amazon. So by using quotation marks around a number of these operators, so like the minus operator if I need a phrase, I'm not going to run this search, but I'll just show you here. For baseball team, that would knot out the entire phrase baseball team. If I want, we looked at Harry Potter or Hunger Games, so with or, and with tilde as well. I'm not going to run this search either, but presumably if I wanted the tilde to act on the entire phrase, I would put it in quotation marks as well. Clearly it doesn't really apply to file type or cite because the information that come after file type or cite looks different. It just looks different. So the last thing to note in going back and looking at this search, the or, again, has to be in all capital letters. If the or is not in all capital letters, Google will handle it as a search term. It won't look for one or the other. It'll look for those two things and the word or. So let's turn to, an older student. maybe not older than is reading the Hunger Games, but an advanced high school science student or a college student who's trying to do research, as one of my students was once, on pigskin. So this student ran this search and got these results. And so let's take a look. I'm going to put this here so you can pause and look at it more if you want to, but we're going to run through it here in Google. Okay, so I ran the search for pigskin. What went wrong? The first thing is it synonymized it to one word and assumed I meant the most exciting meaning of football for of pigskin for the majority of people who come to Google, and that is football. Remember, Google is a product written for everyone, not just for academic use, so sometimes that gives us some challenges. Okay, said my student, what do I do now? So the student decided to do minus pigskin. And the reason the student put pigskin in quotation marks in this case was to say, I want it as the one-word form, not the two-word form. I don't want it. I don't want one word. I just want two. So now we've got results. And oddly, because this is actually kind of unusual for the way we rank, we have skin a pig up front, and then also a lot of things that really aren't scientific, which is, and a lot of cooking when this kid's more looking for biological science information. Okay, he says, it's time to do some predictive search. So what I need is I need to find something about pigskin and what's going to be on a page, probably the Latin name of a pig, which I don't know. Wait, I don't want skin. I want pig, Latin name of a pig. Okay. This is a problem because Google says, hey, pig Latin. We know all about pig Latin. So it's another great time to use quotation marks. Here what we do is we say, really? When I'm talking about pig, I want the Latin name of the pig. I don't want pig Latin for name. Okay, we're getting closer. Now I'm seeing that this is more, there's still some pig Latin in there, and I'm seeing more stuff about Latin name of a pig, but looking at this first result, it's saying there's a different one for hog. So now, maybe I need to be more specific. I'm using the second part of predictive search where I'm looking at my results to determine whether the question I asked in the form of this query is really getting me what I meant it to be. I'm thinking it's not. I'm thinking what I need is domestic concept for pig Latin. For pig. I want a pig who would be on a farm. That's what I want to learn about. Okay, Latin name for pigs. Let's see. Well, this is very interesting. Earlier today I was getting a lot of stuff on this search, but I do see here I've got a Latin name for a pig. And so now I'm going to, by the way, perhaps at some point this person would figure out that perhaps scientific name is a better term, but that's all right. So for right now, we're going to go for this Latin name, which also ideally in real life I would check to make sure was proper to what I wanted. But when I do the search for Suscrofa skin, I now come up with actually quite a few scientific looking terms. Also, now that I have this scientific language that's going to serve me better, I have a couple of choices. I can click on More, go to Scholar, and look at scholarly articles on the subject. Another way to get at that that's a little more open-ended is to come under More Search Tools and to actually click on Reading Level. And in just a moment it will load, and I'll be able to actually pick an advanced reading level page for pigskin. It's not loading extremely quickly at the moment, so we will come back to that later. Okay, so the thing about, so we were talking with that pig Latin example, we saw a use of the minus sign and we saw another use of quotation marks. And here's the thing about quotation marks. I find when I combine them with other ideas, I can do really, or with other operators, I can do really, really powerful searching. Back in the first round of of predictive searching, I showed this, childhood obesity by 2015, 2050. I'll do a shorter version of this search. So what I was talking about last time was that you can actually imagine, for example, language that you see in, oh my, some very alarming statistics there. You can actually imagine the way words are written. Like, you know, I've read a lot of newspaper articles in my life, so I can pull up phrases that tend to consistently appear in newspaper articles or reports of some kind. And I know that if I'm looking for statistics on childhood obesity, they might be predictions or forecasts or estimates or goals or all kinds of things, and it's kind of messy to search, but I know that the term childhood obesity will be there, and I'm pretty sure that a phrase by or by the year, so that's the other version I was going to do, or by the year 2015, 2050, will actually bring up articles that talk about my idea, because those are both concepts that are going to appear in those articles. Here we have this operator, the 2 dots, which is called the number range search. The number range search basically tells Google, I want every number. I want you to search for any number that falls from 2015 to 2050. Again, notice there are no spaces, and it does include both 2015, as you can see in the search results, and also 2050, and anything in between, but not anything outside that range. So it's a pretty cool way to open up your search. Some other examples of that are hybrid 50 ... This, when I use the ... with nothing on the other side, see how there's a space between ... and my terms. What I'm doing here is I'm saying that I want 50, any number 50 or higher. And I definitely want to use that MPG, because you could imagine if I'm asking, it happens here that the top couple hits that we're just looking at, it tends to be related to the idea of miles per gallon, but you could imagine it talking about a hybrid 2008 Prius that gets so many miles per gallon or something like that. So what I'm doing with the quotation marks is first I'm doing a greater than search by leaving it open-ended. And unfortunately, it doesn't do, you cannot do a commensurate less than, just greater than. But the greater than search, the quotation marks that say, when you give me whatever number that's 50 or above, I want it to be right next to MPG. And in the same way, I can add 50 ... miles per gallon. And now I can search for either pages with the word hybrid and 50 ... miles per gallon, or hybrid and 50 or greater, well, with either the I guess you'd say acronym miles per gallon or fully written out. And here it seems that we prefer the MPG, but they are both in there in the results. So again, that's using or, and using quotation marks, and using the number range operator, but it gives me a very, very flexible search. It's a lot more fun. And so it's fun to really just get in and experiment with these and see what you can do. So we have the 2 dots that will allow you to search within a range of numbers or do a greater than search. Sometimes you need to fill in with words instead. So, for example, I decided to find out, I was just kind of at the beginning of a project once, and I was wondering how education spending in different areas, one second, spending on some kind of education has either gone up or gone down from something to something else. And I'm going to point out here, first of all, this wildcard, this asterisk, allows me to fill in the blank with anything. Spending on primary education, spending on private education, spending on higher education. So this is gives me a few words leeway of filling in the blank. And has, it's increased and increased and gone from and ballooned, all kinds of descriptive terms from, and this is going to be a number, right? From 0.8%, from 40 billion, from $9.6 billion to, and I could put another asterisk at the end, but I don't bother because I know that it's already open. Whatever's going to come after 2 is going to come after 2. So I don't really bother to put in an asterisk to show it. But the asterisk, I should point out, like before when I did the search for giants mythology, I can't do this, which some other systems do. We don't have partial word. It's called stemming, where you cut off part of a word and say it can be anything mythology, mythos, mythological. That does not work. Instead, this one that we were looking at before, it fills in for an entire word or a few sets of words. So the final question, the final operator I want to show you comes up in this situation. A student is researching the Helgo Bog Buddha. Go ahead, do a search for Helgo Bog Buddha, and look about what went wrong, and then think about what you can do to fix it. Give it a try. Okay, here's what I found. The Helgo Bog Buddha is a pretty awesome subject, actually, but look what happened. Google's telling me, we think you didn't mean bog, we think you meant big. So now when you look at the results, they all have big. And interestingly, I also find they didn't think I meant Helgo, but perhaps what I meant was Helga, who appears to have taken lots of pictures of a big Buddha. So I have a couple of choices. I can click on Helgo Bog Buddha and get my good results. But let's say I'm coming back, so that's great. It's an easy fix. They show it to me right here on the page. But let's say this is something I know I'm going to be looking at a couple of times, and I don't want to go through that process every time. I can actually put a plus in front of the words and get the same result. It still asks me, did I mean this other thing? But my results are all about the Helgo Bog Buddha. So it's really interesting because there's a Buddha in a bog from Viking times and in Viking regions. It's awesome. In any event, the plus sign I want to take a moment to dwell on because it's very interesting. Its use at Google has changed because it's not primarily intended anymore to it's not really intended anymore to require a word on a page as it used to be. But instead what it does is it turns off whatever you had. It says, no, I know you think that there's this other word that's real popular, but really I mean what I want. I mean what I said. And so please, I'm showing you a plus sign, so please keep it as I typed it in. Now the issue is, again, like with the other operators, if I put a space, if my plus is out there floating with spaces around it, it won't do anything. You see I'm back to Big Buddha again with Helga, because when there's a space, we just ignore the plus. We're like, oh, some random character we can't read. We read it when it's actually touching the word. So we have looked at a bunch of operators. Oops, here they are. We've looked at a bunch of operators. These are the ones we looked at today. Cite, file type, the 2 dots for number range, the asterisk, the wildcard to fill in a word or a small number of words or a number in a blank, quotation marks to keep a phrase together, or to say look for one or the other, plus sign to keep the word in the form I type it in, minus sign to say don't give me any pages with that word, and a tilde to say, hey, what synonyms can you think of? And these are, I'm actually going to give you a link in the materials on our team web page to a huge document I've written with like every operator that's out there, but most of them are just going to be noise. If you can master these, you're going to be in amazing shape. Also, you can check out the advanced search page, which we looked at briefly before. It doesn't have all the operators we talked about, and then it has some other really cool options like restricting your results to something from another country, so you could like just search sites in South Africa or something like that. So the next question is, how does all this tie up? Let's go back to predictive search, because really when I talk about operators with students, I find it's so easy to like just dump a bunch of operators on kids and even adults, and if they get excited about them, like maybe you're thinking, yay, file type, what a great idea. But if it's not from the context of need and from the context of really thinking, what is it that this particular source I want, what's it going to look like, and what unique attributes is it going to have that are really uniquely searchable, then it's not really very memorable. So I want to show you some of the funkier ways that I search. So it turns out that there's a whole lot of information on pages that we don't think about really as being contents of the page, but which are searchable and which can help us find what we want. For example, I love blogs and other sources like that where someone writes an article and then people respond to it. Yes, there's a lot of junk out there, no question, but sometimes you can hit on these amazing blogs where someone shares a really great idea and then a community of interest starts talking among themselves and debating the idea. The one I'm going to show you is not really so much a community of interest in the same way, but nanotechnology. So I was thinking a long time ago, what is it about a blog that makes it unique? It doesn't always say blog on it, but it still may be essentially a blog. And what I realized is they all have this comments and then the number of comments after it. And eventually I realized, wait a second, I can actually use that. I can say that I want the phrase comments, and then I usually use a smaller number like 5, but I actually want comments, and I want a lot of conversation. I want someplace where people are really debating, so I want more than 50 comments, 50 or more comments. And lately, there's been a lot of YouTube. Since it takes comments, those often come up in the top because people like YouTube. And in this case, I don't want, maybe another time, but in this case, I don't particularly want YouTube results. So note that you can also use a minus sign in a combination with other operators, like minus site YouTube, which says, give me any site except YouTube, which is wonderful for other things, but not for today. And then looking at our results, we say, is nanotechnology becoming a serious problem? Debate it out. There are 683 comments. Here we have 75 comments. Here we have 88 comments. Here we have 113 comments. So that's a kind of funky way to apply what we were talking about. Along the same lines, I love teaching students to edit Wikipedia. I use it a lot in information quality. That is, okay, let's go look at this Wikipedia article that's been tagged as lacking quality information, and let's go see what we can do, what's required to make it better. It's a great way to think actively and participatorially. You're not looking at the student's own work and they're not feeling like they both had to create the work and create the list of authoritative sources at that particular time. You're just saying, let's fix someone else's problem and practice some search skills while we do it. And think about what makes a really good source, because you have to pick a good source to put into the Wikipedia bibliography. So it turns out, as you may recall, about Wikipedia, it actually has these things that are called templates. It has these particular notices on them when something's wrong has been marked as wrong with an article, and those are actually searchable. So you can cite wikipedia.org and insufficient inline citations. And here now, what this is going to do, unless you misspell something, Wikipedia, hard P, There we go. It's a little hard to type and talk at the same time, but here we have insufficient Wikipedia, insufficient inline citations. These are all from Wikipedia. At the top, it shows me the footnotes that are talking about that template, but as I move down, I find that these are all pages, and there are many, many pages that have been marked with this particular template. And there are lots of different templates. I can go into Wikipedia, find the different wording, and then come back and search for them, and then either assign my students or have my students pick, depending on the class, which of these articles they're going to clean up. It's a little bizarre, but again, it's something that you don't think of as being searchable, but you can actually solve the problem by searching and using these operators. And in fact, it took first the prediction, the visualization that this is something that's going to appear on the page. Here's a trick I use just as a teacher. You know, sometimes we want to talk to students about that old mythological, wonderful cue we looked for page authority, which sadly is not widespread enough to be entirely useful. We're going to use octopus because I often do as my sample. But I can actually, if I wanted to show a student with a page that had date created and date updated on the bottom, I can either depend on serendipity to find it for me, or I can actually do a search, let's say for pages that were created sometime between 2000 and 2011 and updated sometime between 2010 or 2011. And now I get search results that actually have that information. Were I to click through on any of these, they all have this information at the bottom, and I can show the students what that looks like. So once again, this is just one more example of something that I can use these operators to uncover unexpected information. And these three examples, I mostly want to show them to you because they drive home this idea that searching isn't just, it's about the words on the page. And the first cue is to figure out what the right words are that are going to be on the kind of source you want. But then there's all this other stuff we can do. There's all this formatting, and there are all these traditional ways of communicating. And every bit of information that we can make students and make ourselves aware of about what different kinds of web pages look like, all can be turned into tools to find what we want. To me, it's a very, very exciting concept, and also because I'm a total Boolean geek, it's a ton of fun. So I really think that when it comes down to it, you need to not dump a boatload of operators on someone like we have today. They need to be introduced slowly. They need to be introduced from a point of need with a lot of context. I really love this framework for talking about predicting what a page is going to look like and really pushing yourself to think what's searchable about that. I think this ties back into actually taking the time to teach students about blogs and wikis and all the different formats in which we find information online and what their characteristics are and what kinds of information we expect to find in them. And it all ties in with this concept of operators and makes them so much more meaningful and sticky, memorable. So do please practice. I'm going to, where you found this link, hopefully it came with our page at sites.google.com. Here, let me show you. It's sites.google.com/site/gwebsearcheducation. And if you go here into the webinar archives, you will actually find I'll be adding information about this archives, including links to some more resources that I hope will be of help to you. Thank you so much for your time. You should get a survey when this ends. It's going to look a little different than usual. It won't pop up in a separate box. It's actually going to pop up in your browser, and it has both questions about how you liked this course, which would be extremely helpful to me if you'd fill out, but it also has some questions to let you kind of test how much you remember immediately from watching this. We don't know who you are, so don't be nervous. We can't map it back to you. Just give us an idea. It'll give us an overall assessment of how these materials worked. And if you don't get them right this time, don't worry, because you can always come back and watch the webinar again and take the survey again if you wish or not. Have a lovely, lovely day, and see you next time.